I took a stroll downtown this evening when I heard music echo through the night. So I started running so I wouldn't be too late. In the neon light, what the music could reveal through the night.
Welcome everyone to Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I'll be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be having a special guest, Daniel Moody, coming on talking about the work he does as a life coach. And I know we have had many coaches come on, life coaches, mindset coaches, communication coaches, money coaches. There's so many different coaches, but you have to understand, I can have the same coach on and there's a totally different perspective, totally different conversation. The terminologies might be different. They might be the same, but the conversation that Daniel and I have today is going to be enlightening and impactful. Many of the things that you have been wondering, many of the things that you have been struggling with, many of the things that you might not even know and made yourself aware, we're going to be addressing that today. Especially the idea of men and what society has told us who we should be, how we should act. And it's challenging to be a man and to not follow the societal standards, because the moment we don't, we're ridiculed. The moment we have something bad to say, we're ridiculed, we're outcasted. The mind, it continually wants pleasure, peer acceptance. There's a reason why cancel culture is so rampant nowadays. Oh, this person's been canceled, this person's been that because of an opinion, someone else's viewpoints. And the way we do things here in Coaching in Session, we're having concepts, it's all theory. It's the idea, because your truth is your truth. I'm not here to change who you are to who you're becoming. I'm here to give you a different perspective and to listen to some great conversation. Now you're listening to some great conversation and you might find, wow, I really like what this coach had to say. And maybe we talk about something that's going to be controversial. And then you might say, oh, it's getting spicy. Let's see what happens next. Whatever drives you to listen to the episodes, to the podcast, I want you to do more than just open up your eyes and open up your ears. I want you to open up your heart, open up your mind, and then to be aware of what comes in and what comes out. Because though I talk about positivity, personal development, success, abundance, all of those wonderful things that everyone wants, but just because I tell you that you can attain it, do you do the things necessary to attain it? And if you do the things to attain it, how do you do it? Sometimes people sacrifice themselves just to get ahead a little bit, just to make someone else love them, appreciate them. And though there's no right or wrong way to live life, there's only your way. How are you living? Are you happy? Do you have your emotions in check? When you see your future, is it something that irks you or makes you sad or depressed, or is it something that you're excited for? There's so much more to life than just right now, but we do have to understand the most important part, right now, because many people, they treat today, right now, this moment, as something that is going to happen again. And you hear this a lot when people say, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it the next day, I'll do it next week. Why not now? Why not change your life today? I think that's something that many people have to transition their mind to think, what can I do right now? How can I change my life today? How can I change my life right now? Getting down to the actions that we are able to accomplish. Sometimes we have a roadblock, and that roadblock can be our insecurities, our anger, our anxiety, our past traumas. And all of that we have to uncover. And today, that is our journey, to uncover all of those traumas, all of those hurts, all of those societal pressures that we were given, so we can find our truth, to find our meaning, and to find the answers that are going to lead us to where we want to be in life. So let's get into that interview with Daniel and myself. Welcome, Daniel Moody, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I would like to thank you for being patient with me and for spending time with us today. Yeah. We're going to be talking about the work you do as a life coach. And I know I have many life coaches on Coaching in Sessions about bringing on other coaches, but with unique and different perspectives. And I know you have a unique way of teaching your coaching clients and helping them along the way to a better life. Can you briefly explain the work you do and how you separate yourself from everyone else?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I do work a lot with dads. Being a dad, I've run into a lot of challenges with anger, resentment, very strong echoes of generational trauma from the misery that has been passed down from us. And I've also carried that forward through my work as a songwriter, creating containers where I get to do the creative process of writing a song with somebody, distilling their story into lyrics, which often has a really profound benefit of giving them something to take home that they get to sing to themselves. A question that I often ask people is, when did you stop singing? And that usually pinpoints to some point in their life where they stop using their voice. And the voice is, it's a powerful tool. It's perhaps one of the most powerful tools we have as a human being. To access our voice, to speak our truth, and to know ourselves fully can be done through this process of simply telling our story. And I get to encapsulate that and put it into song, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do. So that's my personal flavor, dads and anybody who has a story to tell.
What was your experience with fatherhood? Was it positive, negative, or was it more of an awakening for you?
All of the above. I became a dad when I was 18. So it was a very strong, sudden thing that kind of took my life by storm and was the beginning of the awakening of me realizing just how much I did not have a sense of autonomy or authority over my own life. I went with the flow. I moved out to LA. I followed this path that I thought that I should, but I was becoming more and more miserable through the process. Yeah, I've hit bottom a number of times in my life. That with parenthood happened again when I married someone else, had another child, and performed for many years trying to be whatever would make her happy. And eventually it all came crashing down, as dishonesty inevitably leads to. The role of fatherhood is the thing that really ties me to that consistent journey, because I became a dad at 18, and that meant that I suddenly had to thrust myself into the understanding that something is more important in this world than I am. That is a huge catalyst for a spiritual journey. I actually don't know of anything more powerful than that, to realize that you're not actually the center of the universe, as it does feel like when you're a child. But fatherhood, parenthood becomes this role of service. That meant that there was something that was going to tie me to doing the work of waking up to my unconscious conditioning to respond with anger, to respond with emotional manipulation, to try to get my way. It's basically like peeling layers of the onion. I mean, there's no end to the opportunities for growth in that role.
Yeah, parenthood is one of those things where it might seem easy, especially if you're on the outside, but once you're finally in that game of parenthood, if you want to consider a game, just think of like a football analogy. When you're in the game, it's different than if you're on the sideline saying, "Hey, you could do this." Like, you don't know how strong the other team is because you're not there. When you take the role of parent, it's kind of like everything comes rushing at you, and then you have a little one looking at you, diapers change, crying, needs food. I remember I was speaking to someone on the podcast, and he basically said, like, when you're young, it's like you don't have much power. Like, you're basically just there and you're being assisted by someone. And typically that's the parent. So you do have to be selfless. Sometimes you have to cancel gigs or cancel work or things like that, because who's going to watch the baby? And before, when you can just get up and leave and go on your path and go on your journey, now it's kind of like, well, you have another factor to pay attention to. When we are all young, especially in high school, we give ourselves a path, like a destination, and we say, this is where I want to be. Whether it be, maybe you're good at math and you want to be an accountant, or you want to be an engineer. Maybe you're good at biology, you want to be a scientist, you want to be a nurse or a doctor. Down that path, we kind of give ourselves a destination of the things that we're good at and the things that we would most probably want to end up. Sometimes when people give themselves a destination, they find out that happiness is not at the end of that destination. It was like not in their plan. Maybe give us a little bit of your story, how you had a destination. You said earlier you thought maybe happiness would be there. And then one step further, how do you help your clients realize, okay, well, where is their true happiness, or where is that true destination lie?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, I often use the metaphor of the mountain. You may think happiness is at the top of the mountain and you're climbing the whole way to get there, and you realize that it was actually in you the entire time. You could have it at any moment, but what if you get to the top of the mountain and what you think is there is not actually there? That was certainly the case for me. That phrase is pretty popular now, happy wife, happy life. I've become glaringly aware of that through this process of trying to get somewhere. And very much of the time it was to please my wife, very much unconsciously trying to get love in a roundabout way. I give all of my life and my attention in order to get the love that I want. But really what was happening is that I was asking her to basically hold me in my pain so that I didn't actually have to heal it, but that she could comfort me through the process of living. And that worked up until the point that we had our son. My wife and I, we had a very enmeshed relationship. We were very affectionate. And then my son came along and she had to give all that loving attention to him. And I became outraged at the fact that my surrogate mama was not available to me anymore. I had fulfilled my role as becoming a successful photographer. I had given it all, and there was nothing coming back for me. It's not until years later that I sort of burn through that awareness. I become aware that I have a mother wound, that I have some work to do on myself, that I've been pouring myself into this relationship, into this home life, realizing that it's not actually where I'm going to get energy back. You know, I read something like David Data down the line where he talks about filling your belly with purpose so that you can come to her with a full heart. Well, I was coming to her with an empty belly and a needy heart. And so the perpetual desire to please, you know, my father was a photographer, so I picked up a camera. It was an easy way to make money. It was something that I could have the semblance of success on the exterior, but it wasn't actually something that nourished me. It's image based, you know, it's skin deep. It wasn't until that sort of fell apart that I allowed myself to ask the question, what do I actually want to do with my life? The image came to mind of sitting around a campfire with a group of men talking about the meaning of life. And it's basically just brotherhood, the echoes of memories of the tribe, of the village. And I'd always felt that sense of lacking in my life. So it was no wonder that I essentially isolated myself and put all of the expectations of needing the entire tribe to be satiated by just one person, my wife. And my children's need for me, it was basically like, how can you ask anything of me? I have nothing to give. There's nothing regenerating energy within me. I'm drained, I'm angry, I'm miserable. It wasn't until she started to speak very honestly back at me, you're miserable to be around, that it shook me awake. How could this be that I am trying to be as loving and generous as possible, unable to see the backhanded nature of my giving? You know, I'm pretending that it's an open hand, but it's actually a grasping hand. Please love me. Please fill my wound for me. So it was in the pursuit of trying to be the provider, of be the husband, of be the family man. But she actually asked me, did you ever ask to be the family man? Has it ever been a conscious choice for you? Because having a kid at 18 unexpectedly and falling into that role and just assuming that this is the way for me to be the upstanding version of myself, that all crumbled. And it was the truth that set me free in that instance. And it was extraordinarily painful. It was the purifying fires. It was also the moment in which I got to expand beyond the box that kept me. That small box of the version of I'm the second version of my father, gone into parenthood without actually choosing it, but I'm going to force myself to buck up and enjoy it, even though that's not actually how joy works. And it's been a long, slow process of finding how to fill my belly with purpose, coaching people. It was never something that I would have consciously thought that would be a great fit for me until I realized that I'd been unconsciously doing it for years. I was a lot of friends' self-help buddy. I'm the one who always liked to have the deep conversations. I wanted to go into the problem with people. And then a few years into that, I'm starting to realize that I want to write songs with people. It turns out that everybody that has a healing journey has a story, and that story can be encapsulated in this beautiful form that I'm already doing with myself. So I'm basically like this endless channel of music and melody, and everybody's got lyrics for me. So it's just this amazing thing that fills me up with energy and joy. And that was the kind of thing that David Data talks about, filling your belly with purpose. Because I'm actually starting to do the things that I want to do, I come to my family with joy now. And it doesn't mean that it was overnight. It's still a long process of facing my conditioning. And I have a lot of anger. A lot of anger comes out. It's generational. My son has it. We butt heads. Just this morning, we had a moment where the anger flashed in both of us, and I had to drop down to his level and meet him at the heart space. That's my journey. I had a coaching client talking to me this morning about having a challenging transition around bedtime with his kids, and I'm walking him through the same process that I'm walking myself through, of collecting them, of being the garden wall, to where I'm not the prison wall that's just all hard concrete and barbed wire, but I'm actually the garden wall that is covered in vines and roses and flowers that says, hey, let's play a game of ball, but we are going to go to bed. So let's play this last round. And then, hey, what do you want to read around bedtime, rather than yelling at them? That's where we all struggle, is being able to even be there enough for ourselves so that we can break the chains of trauma that created these problems within ourselves that we are unconsciously giving forward.
I love the idea that you use songwriting. That's different for healing. I think every coach does it a little bit differently. For me, I'm a fan of journaling, but how I do journaling is different, where they have my cell phone number and they text me.
Okay.
They are allowed to text me whenever they want. It could be 2 o'clock in the morning. My phone has a do not disturb feature on it. So after business hours, it stops giving me notifications, but the phone remains on. So the first thing I see in the morning, I see all the people who send me stuff, if it was any at night. Most of the time, they wait till the morning or they late in the evening, and then we can have that conversation. So usually I go to the gym first thing in the morning, and between my sets, I start replying to people. So when I'm at the gym, I'm able to get a hold of them and respond to them. And then they can say, okay, they had some time to think. And then now they're getting the response that they were looking for, because sometimes they're looking for an outlet. And I remember when I first started journaling in college, I had a lot of anger, a lot of uncertainty. It was a lot of doubt in my mind. And what I did was I just wrote on a piece of paper. I had a whole notebook. And I would just write and write and write and write and write until I couldn't write anymore. Not that my hand was hurting, but my mind didn't have any more words to say. And I would write down everything, every crazy idea, every crazy thought. I put it on paper. And what that did for me was it helped me get rid of it out of my brain. So now it's on the paper. The paper has my problems. Let me focus on the solution. So I started to shift my mind to look at the solution and not so much of the problem. I think most of the problems that I was facing dealt with the ego and what society kind of pushes men to be, where men are typically considered a protector and a provider, right? Similar to how you were saying, was that your role? Was that what you wanted to be pushed into? And men have to be tough. Men don't cry. Men have the ability to be very angry and spiteful and all of these things that are men, right? And then if we look at women, it's going to be the opposite. They're sweet, caring, affectionate, loving. Men are not that, right? So when you finally have a little one in your hand, you're not going to be angry and hurtful and deceitful to this young one. You're going to be loving, caring, affectionate. So it's different. It's like a wake-up call to finally realize that, hey, my life wasn't what society was giving me. And every coach, again, has a different way of helping someone bring out their truth. Similar, like you do songwriting, I do journaling, conversation, of course. But then they can really determine, what do they want, right? Because I find many people do what other people want. When I first started my career, I was in accounting, and I always thought, what would my mom want? She would want someone who, okay, was good at accounting, made a good job, money, and things like that. And then I did accounting for 2 years and I was miserable. And I said, I can't do this. I'm like 19 and I'm miserable. So I switched majors and I wanted to be a teacher. It's something that I knew intrinsically was what I wanted. And so when I told her, she was like, huh? Like she was like shocked I'm being a teacher, because teachers don't make any money. So I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And so I went down that path, and then that was only until after I did all the work on myself, really figuring out what I wanted my life to look like. And then not so much looking at the destination, but being present in the moment and being able to see what was around me rather than what I gave myself for the future or what society gave me for the future. If you think of society, you should have 2 kids, a white house, and a picket fence, right? The American dream. When you're 65, you get to retire and you get to live your life happy, where you have financial freedom. You don't have to worry about anything. But what do you give up? There's so many sacrifices that I think many people give to the world that they don't realize that they're giving. And then when they're finally left alone and they're empty and they're angry and they have all this anxiety and hurt, they're trying to find a way to heal. And many of my clients that I get, they don't come from a place of good and wealth, not wealth as in money, but abundance and love and care. They're in a really negative place in their mind and the way they're thinking. It's a journey to get them back, to bring them back from that and say, hey, there's so much more to be paying attention to. It's always a little bit different. I wanted to get into the idea of family dynamics, because I think that kind of plays a role, especially in the work you do when you're dealing with parents that are going to be dealing with their young ones. What are the roles that typically happen? Is it something that people should talk about to their partner, or is it something that society kind of laid out and we should just kind of follow through with what was told to us?
That's a solid point you make. The expectations laid upon us at birth or by our society, by our parents, our family of origin, they're going to deeply affect the way that we view ourselves in reality. And I most certainly had this idea of responsibility, this idea of being a provider, and this stick it outness. It's life is hard, life is suffering. Just stick it out. And so it wasn't until it all just became just too hard that I finally admitted that I didn't have the strength or the passion or the capacity to stick it out anymore. And I really needed to ask, what do I want? That question before about you're trying really hard to get somewhere, thinking that happiness is at the end of the journey. Well, ultimately, life is a journey. It continues. You have many, many thresholds you pass through, many finish lines that are also beginning lines. Your child being born is the ending of you and your partner as two solo individuals or as a couple. It now becomes a family unit. That is a beginning and an ending in that moment. We need moments like that to be marked with celebration and also initiation so that we can say to ourselves, so that we can be told from society, from our culture, from our community, that things are different now. What was expected of you before is different than what is expected of you now. The first father blessing I ever got to be a part of was one that I led. I got the transcript from a friend of mine who had led one before. I practiced it and I read it and spoke it with my own voice and my own truth to a friend of mine. We had a ritual where we tied him to a tree and he had to burn through the rope that we had dipped in the creek out of a fire that he built himself. The fibers represented the father that is unconscious, that would never let us outgrow him, that doesn't want to compete with us. And the waters of the mother are the what you dip the rope in. And it makes it very hard to burn through a rope once it's been dipped in the creek. So there's this symbolic action speaks to something that we are struggling with internally. And having these moments marked by being surrounded by other brothers and other members of our community so that we can take the time to stop and look inside and say, what's happening to me? Why is everything so much harder now? So much more, so much different than I expected it was going to be. It doesn't look like the Hallmark card when the baby's there and I can't sleep and she's miserable with me and I'm not getting any love and affection. It's entirely different than what I thought it was going to be. And there's still nobody around, no one around, no elder, no friend group to tell me what's going on and why am I miserable and help me because I'm just really angry and I'm letting it out and I can't stop. And this was my story. And the reason I wanted to do a father blessing for my friend is because I did not have one for myself. It was very important for me. It was an opportunity. It was cathartic for me. Within a normal human lifespan, for most of our lineages as the human species, we would have had a tribe, a village who gets to watch us from the moment we're born to the moment we die, a group of people that gets to know us and reflect ourselves back to us. We get to know ourselves through the group. There's no identity outside of a community. An individual has no identity. They cannot see themselves. They're just ego projecting in on itself. So the group tells you what's going on. And if you're disassociated from a tribe, from a group, from a family, it becomes very hard to know what the hell you're doing. And then you live a very unconscious life where your unconscious patterns of anger and repressed resentment and a sense of loss and lacking from any real meaning of connection, like you mentioned, trying to be an accountant when you did not have any fire or passion for that. Yeah, you could get a paycheck, but eventually you're going to burn out, as we're seeing happen all over the spectrum. People are just burning out from doing things that they thought were going to be one thing and turned out to be another. There was a carrot being dangled in front of them and they never get to eat the damn carrot. They're never getting nourished. Their bellies are never full. They're just perpetually hungry and eventually you starve. What is positive about that is that the idea starves. The identity as the accountant starves, but you remain. The spirit that carries through and burns through the fire, all that is non-essential is burned away. And fatherhood, parenthood, being the provider was something that burned me up over and over again. It still continues to this day to burn away what is non-essential, to reveal to me how I'm still abandoning myself, the energetic patterns of me going to please before I actually rest inside myself. Simple example is I'm going to wash the dishes and make breakfast for the family before I eat. Therefore, I am getting hangry, and therefore I am temperamental and aggressive. And that's not what I want. So I feed myself first, and then I do the dishes, and then I make breakfast for my family. And from there, I'm loving. I have a buffer of energy. I'm patient. My stomach is not growling at me from the inside because I've put my consciousness inside my body and asked, what do I need? Oh, I need food. Oh, I need a morning practice where I move and meditate before they even wake up. These are things that I had to learn the hard way. If I didn't have my morning practice, I would be the same old asshole I've always been. If I didn't have an opportunity to set my body and mind right every single day, I would be living those same unconscious patterns. It's the only way I break the loop.
For me, our roles were a little bit, I guess, maybe switched at the time of marriage for me. For me, I was already grounded. I did the work for having a strong mindset where I knew my morning routine. And it's not my morning routine is this. I wake up, I do this exactly, and then everything is good. My days could be perfect where I would go to the gym in the morning. I still do to this day, where I use the gym time to be mindful. Even if I'm still texting people, I'm still being mindful because I'm in that space of being mindfulness and speaking to them with a mindful and open heart, where I'm able to give them more than just a blanket statement or what they want to hear. I go deep. I go deep in the morning. That time, it helps me get a hold of who I am, where I am. I do a self-assessment every morning. Am I at 100%? Am I at 50%? And that gives me a gauge of, okay, this is where I am today. Let's move accordingly. Versus I'm trying to operate at 100% and I only have 70% to give that day. That's burnout. So I'm going to try to do everything I did that day, only to find myself at the end of the day in a worse state. Now maybe I'm more angry or maybe anxiety starting to kick in. So there's different things I've learned. And then once marriage became a factor, having someone else share your space and in your life, it kind of throws your routine out the window. And then let alone having a kid. For me, in the beginning of the marriage, it was difficult to have that morning time where it was like, okay, she needs attention too. So it's like, okay, focusing on that. But then it came to a point, and this only took a couple of months for me to realize that I was like steadily going downhill where I was becoming a ego-driven fool. And I said, you know what? This is the wrong direction. Let me take a step back. And so I had talked to her and I said, I like going to the gym in the morning. I like being quiet in the morning. It's not that I don't want to talk to you. It's just that in the morning time is for me to collect myself and then present what I have collected. Basically, let's say every night I might go to sleep in pieces. This is not the case, but to kind of give some imagery, I wake up and I'm in pieces. And then the first thing I do in the morning is put everything together. I mean, at night I go to sleep well. In the morning I wake up well. But that wasn't always the case. There was time in my life where I went to sleep and I was worried and I woke up and I was exhausted and I had to figure out what I had to do. And I would just scrounge through the day. And that was in my early 20s. I was able to adjust accordingly by the time I was 23 to 24. And I started that routine and I kept it all the way up until I was married and I was 30. Now I was giving up my routine that has been helping me and I had to adjust it for someone else. And now that I have a kid, it's even more difficult because it's like, okay, she has her life. I have my life. We have our life together. But now this child has a life with us too. So it's like that juggling aspect of being a parent, being a husband, and then also not looking at your past circumstances. My father didn't have a father growing up. And one of the vows he gave himself was, I want to be the father I never had. So he did his best to raise a family of 3, and he didn't know anything about being a father, so he was learning. And then now that I'm a father, he always talks to me and he says, I hope I did a good job and things like that. I did the best I could. And I told him, I said, you did a great job because you came from not knowing how to be a father. You were in a trial and experiment type of phase. And for me, I could see that firsthand. I saw what he went through. I saw the challenges he was giving himself. And then that wisdom I learned from him. So he went through the pain and the suffering and the challenge so I can learn from it. It's difficult to continue that wisdom down the line because I might have learned from him, but if my son doesn't learn from me the mistakes, is my son going to continue to make those same mistakes down the line? And you said it's early on, you said that you were trying to represent your father, be like your father, right? It's just like an anger thing where it's all about perception, though. Because if I saw my father being an alcoholic and my brother saw my father being an alcoholic, my brother might have said, well, my father's an alcoholic. I should be one too, because that's what men do. And I can see my father and I can say, I can see how destructive that alcohol is. Let me stay away from that and then not become an alcoholic. So there is some type of perception that plays a role. When we have that ability to perceive what we should do rather than what was presenting to us, is that something that we learn from that experience? For example, if we had a father who was an alcoholic, we have that choice to be an alcoholic or not be an alcoholic. Do you think that many people are going to look at that scenario as, okay, I should do what he's doing or I should not do what he's doing because it's destructive? I guess it's hard to explain it because it's like all about perception. It's like, it depends on the person because the person might see it a different way. Men see colors differently. Maybe, I don't know. It's kind of like that. So kind of going down that, I know it's a tricky question, but if you can, maybe add some clarity and a little bit of light to that.
Yeah, I can't say I know the answer, and I think that you hit it on the head, is that it does depend on the person and their perceptions. I was thinking when my son was born, it was evident as soon as he started making any kind of gesture that he had a personality of his own, a character of his own. And the more he has developed, the more clear and stark that character has developed, and the awareness that he is so tremendously different than my daughter in personality. Me and my brother, we were brought up in the same home, but we had completely different instincts. And the things that I often think about you might have one generation of parents that are very, very strict and rigid, and then you have the following generation that are very, very loose, and then the next generation goes back to being strict and rigid because the loose was too loose. For each of us, we're all just trying to strike balance, but for so many of us, the instinct is to do the opposite of what the parents did. If I were to give any kind of personal wisdom to this, it would have been something along the lines of balancing the two, that it is not trying to be them and it is not trying to not be them. Because if I try to not be my father, I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's a tremendous amount of value that I, for a long time, did try to not be my father. And what that did was create a mental, psychological, spiritual block between him and me within myself. So I wasn't open to his playfulness, to his sense of fluidity and what he was good at. And I was blocking myself off to those things because I had this idea of don't be like your father. That was a thing that I heard a lot. The same with my mother. If I'm trying to be nothing like her, oh my God, I'm cutting myself off from my creativity, from my spirituality. I'm cutting myself off from my emotionality and my own heart. And I had all good reasons at the time, righteous reasons for cutting them off and trying to be my own person. But easy is the instinct to go in the opposite direction. And when it happens to just be going inward, very simple, what am I? And the truth is that I'm both of them. And I am whatever I am at birth. Whatever spirit, soul came into this, whatever uniqueness that is the amalgam of the two, plus my family, plus my circumstances, plus the times, plus all of my experiences in this life that teach me new things in relationship with what they gave me. I would want for my son to neither try to become me, most definitely do not become me, nor completely reject what I have to offer. And it's quite clear that he's a very different person. Though we both have anger, he expresses it outwardly, whereas I internalized it. I would repress and then explode. He explodes right off the bat. And so I'm having to learn how to contend with anger on a whole new level. And what's remarkable, being the person that I am and being the type of sensitive, emotional, empathic person that I am, oftentimes I pick up his anger as my own, and mine will amplify it. If I'm not in any way angry at all, if he comes to me with an ounce of anger, mine will flare up. And I have to contend with anger yet again. Not my choosing, something that I tell my clients, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility. I did not choose to be born. I did not choose to have this affliction of anger, but I am endowed with it. So I must learn to wield it, because anger is both a positive and negative emotion. It has destructive qualities as well as creative qualities. It can be a tremendous source of fuel. So if I just banish my anger, try to get rid of my mother or my father's anger, then I am only repressing something in myself. I'm not actually integrating. I'm working against something. I'm trying to get freedom from something, which is a pushing away. And if I am doing that, then I'm denying my son the opportunity to integrate his anger. So it's some mixture of the two, where I'm holding space for his anger while also learning to use mine more appropriately so that he can see what it's like, have an example of what it's like. He's already seen me use it inappropriately. There's nothing I can do to put that cat back in the box. Like it is out there. Dad has anger, and he has been volatile and explosive. And my son has that too and brings it, and I cannot judge him. And it does me no good to try to limit him and squash it. The more I squash it, the stronger his anger gets. Basically, it's just like throwing fuel on the fire. With this lineage of anger, I cannot cut myself off from it. I don't have the option. It arises on its own. It's being presented to me by my circumstances, by my relationships. Again, it's sort of like that purifying fire. I have to consciously go inward and burn in it so that I can do away with what is unnecessary and let the truth be enough. Just the simple truth of what I am, and which is not a performance, and it's not a choice. It's something that I have from beginning, middle to end, and the ego is going to try to twist it, capture it, commoditize it. It's going to try to spin it to make it something different or better than what it is. And nothing is better than simply accepting the truth. What were your parents? What are you? What are your children? And it's not an answer. There is no answer other than what is happening in this moment. It's an inquiry. It's a constant question.
Yeah, no, I think that answers what I was trying to explain on. It's going to be them, the personality. They're going to see things and they're going to do things. And the one thing I always tell myself, especially when I'm dealing with someone younger, is that they are learning. Sometimes they're doing things for the first time. There's an example of a mom who was holding her son's hand, and it was raining outside, and there was a huge puddle. And the mom knew not to let the kid jump in the puddle, because then the kid's socks would get wet and the kid would be complaining the socks are wet. So she said, I'm just going to bring him around the puddle. But now that child doesn't have the experience of getting those wet socks, of jumping in the puddle and seeing how the law of physics are going to be when you splash and how it splashes up into your face. You can feel the water, things like that. He missed that. And sometimes I think we do a disservice, especially parents and teachers. I was a teacher for several years before moving on to the coaching world. We do a disservice to our children because we know not to do it this way. Let's do it this way because this is the way that it should be done. This is the right way. Perfect example. You know what a tree looks like. I know what a tree looks like. A kid might draw a circle and say it's a tree, but we say that's not a tree. That could be a sun, that could be a cookie, but it's not a tree. And so we show them what a tree looks like, and then we give them that experience. Oh, this is a tree. Now we influence that child. Sometimes when we influence people, it might not come from the best places in our heart. Not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen where a teacher can say, all right, well, I'm not going to teach the curriculum, and I'm going to teach just because I believe this is what you should learn. I'm a big believer when it comes to school. If you're a teacher, you have the curriculum, right? It's there for a reason. Teach the curriculum. I know there's some things in the curriculum that are coming out that many parents are not liking. So they're opting for homeschool, which is more power to the parents if they have that ability. I know many parents rely on school to be able to go to work and then have their kids learn because they don't have that time. Because when you're teaching, especially a young mind, they're so intuitive to what's going on. They see every little factor, every little micron of what you do. They pay attention. You could be at the table, you're drinking some wine, and you might say, no, you're not old enough to have wine. That right there can lead to alcoholism. It's possible. I'm not saying it will. But if we look at the statistics of America, the drinking age of 21 versus in Europe, they can start drinking, I believe, 16 or 18, something like that. At the dinner table, if the parents are having wine and the kid asks for some wine, the parents would give them a little bit of wine, where it's not a taboo to give the kid this alcohol. And so the kids growing up not seeing it as something that is meant for adults. And I'm a victim of that. As soon as I turned 21, guess what I did? I went to the clubs. And now this is what I thought I had to do. I'm 21. I can drink, so I should drink. We give that to our kids too, where we like, this is a kid. This is what you're supposed to be doing versus how do you want to grow up? It's different between being very strict and then pragmatic. When I was a teacher, I wanted to be pragmatic. I wanted to give them more freedom to find their own truth. Now, if they went in a different direction, for example, they say 2 plus 2 is 17, I'm going to say, oh, that's interesting. How'd you get there? And then they might show me. Then I say, well, let's get some apples or some fingers, some Legos, whatever. I say, show me how do we get 17? So they find their truth versus me telling them the truth. It's difficult, especially when you might not have a lot of patience. Teaching requires a lot of patience. Parents requires more patience than being a teacher. I can attest to that. It's difficult when you have to be patient at the home and you might have had a stressful day. You might have a lot of things going on, a lot of clients, things like that. Your day is packed, but then you still have to be open and you still have to be flexible. Going back to bedtime, like talking to one of your clients about bedtime, saying it's bedtime, but not being so rigid. Saying, okay, yeah, sure, we can play ball. Yeah, we can, play princess, or we can read a book. We can do something, but then it's bedtime versus, all right, it's bedtime. It's 9 o'clock on the dot. Let's go. All right. And then you're being militant almost. There is a balance that you have to figure out, and you do have to understand the personality of your child. That's going to be the intuitiveness of the parent too, because sometimes people are unable to see someone, like truly see someone, where someone can have a smile on them. They can be exuberant and they can be glowing, but really on the inside, they're hurt. The darkness, the depression is there. We see that a lot with social media. People present themselves in a different way, a different light. And then everyone thinks, oh, everything's okay, but they're really struggling. And I think having an outlet like a coach, a men's coach, women's coach, it doesn't matter, life coach, to finally release that and to talk to someone. I think that's so powerful. And it wasn't until I started talking to mentors and life coaches where I started to realize the power behind it, because I was being told by myself and by the world who I should be, rather than talking to someone how I think I should be versus someone seeing how I am. And I think that's important because sometimes we have those blind spots that we don't necessarily see until it's too late, until we burn the house down, until we have wreaked havoc in our life, or we hit rock bottom again and again and again. What's the problem? What am I doing wrong? And sometimes when you have a coach, it becomes easy to say, okay, well, let's analyze everything. Let's talk it out. When you're working with clients on that level where they're confused to who they should be, how they should act, what are some of your methods and approaches that you would bring them along to coming to that final end of their maybe true identity or their true self or something along those lines? I know the terminology might be different.
So for me, it always comes back to the body. It's a somatic approach. Getting to know yourself is coming to know your whole self. We often are very heady people, very mind-oriented people, way up in our thoughts, our eyes. It's where all our sense organs are. We have a lot of information coming in through our heads, and our minds are incredibly powerful. And so living in a culture where it's all about consumption of information and quick responses, we're living on this very, very narrow band of frequency. And we are neglecting what is the majority of our sensory input of being a human animal, which is at the level of the body. We feel emotions primarily in the body. We can feel some things on the head. Anger is often experienced behind the eyes. But for the rest of what we're experiencing, we feel it often from the neck down. And so much of my work is really just getting people to slow down enough to live in the time span of the body. So the mind is an incredible time machine. It'll send you way into the future, which mine loves to do in daydreaming about potential variations of how everything's going to turn out. It never turns out that way, by the way. It also sends me way back into the past, reviewing moments that I could have done better, or these things that I thought should have been a different way. And it'll send me back and forth, even in this very conversation. It's a part of my practice to stay here in this moment, because everything that you're saying is interesting me, and it's connecting me to something in my past, or it's making me think about something in the future, something I'm going to say, something I'm going to do. And to stay here in the body is where I'm actually existing in this present moment. If I'm living 5 steps ahead, I'm going to be out of sync with reality. If I'm living in the past, I'm going to be dragging something dead in that's not living into the here and now. The only thing that I have that's true and reliable is what I am in this moment, and that exists in the present in the body. The body can only live in the present. And the emotions that we experience in the body, there's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. You've probably heard about it, read about it. It's a very simple premise that what we experience, particularly and acutely around trauma, lives inside of the body. And it does not go away until we address it. And by addressing it, I mean we put our attention there. So the somatic healing approach is simple. You breathe and you put your attention on your breath. You breathe deep, you breathe all the way out. You come to experience the breath at a different pace than the shallow, unconscious breathing that usually doesn't really give us all the oxygen that we need. James Nestor's Breathe talks about how we are actually breathing many times more frequently than we actually need. The optimal number of breaths is 5.5 breaths a minute. So some average around 5 breaths is going to give you the optimal amount of oxygen for your system, and it's going to make you feel relaxed and safe in your environment. Most of us are breathing shallow breaths that are not fully expanding the lungs and also not fully expelling them either. So we have this uncirculated, unfresh oxygen. And just the simple act of breathing deeply and expelling it fully, just in 5 breaths, you can radically change the experience that you're having in the body right now. That also opens you up to be more aware of sensations in the body, which is where emotions are stored. So if we have trauma from our past, for me, I hold a lot of rigidity in my neck and shoulders, particularly my left shoulder. It's tighter. It's where I'll find myself tensing up first, and it tends to twist my body a little bit. I'll also notice that my eyes start to wander. These are things that are cues for me. The internal watchman sees these things and says, oh, I'm being dishonest, or oh, I'm living in the past or future. I come back to my breath and my body, I relax those things, and I come back to myself. It's the exact same thing as becoming embodied, as awakening to your truth, is just simply relaxing the body. A book by a gentleman named Red Hawk called Self-Observation has a quote that I love. It says, a relaxed body is an honest body. So if what we're going for is living in truth, living in honesty, would be to relax the body. So whether it is that we're trying to be a truly embodied, true version of ourselves, it comes to the level of being in the body, as well as aware of your thoughts, as well as aware of the person that's sitting in front of you. It's remarkable. The human eye has a fixed focal point in the center that's like 3% of what we actually see, but it's the majority of the focus of the eye. And that's the majority of the information that we actually perceive with our minds and from our visual field. But then there's this broad, diffuse information coming in from the rest of our peripheral vision. And attention is much the same way. We can hyper-focus the center of our attention on something, and that's much the way the mind works. So when we're reading a book and when we're listening to intently to a conversation, we're hyper-focused. But then there's also the axis of the diffuse consciousness, the diffuse awareness that takes up the periphery of our vision, the periphery of our sensations in the body. Like just now, in this moment, we take a deep breath and we become aware of the air on our skin. We become aware of the feeling of the soles of our shoes on the bottom of our feet, or the back of the chair on our body. And suddenly we can take in the scope of the room, the way the audio is bouncing off, or the way the air is moving through the room, or the size of the space that you're in. And just that, we realize we're not actually separate from our environment. The air that's in my lungs is actually a part of the air that's in this, that's a part of the air that's born from the trees outside. I'm actually not a separate being. That settles the nervous system and makes us aware, much more aware of what we actually are in space and time. We think we are our thoughts most acutely. Eckhart Tolle talks about that a lot. We mistake ourselves for what is most interesting. If a child loses themselves in play, they become the play. They are identifying as the play, just as we identify as what our ego projects. I am Daniel. I am a coach, or I'm a photographer, or I am a father. I'm a failure. I'm a burden. I'm a miserable man. And I become that. And my body takes the shape of that. And it is only when I come back to the body, relax it, that I remember I am anything. I am everything. I am consciousness, alive in this form, aware of the space around me. Therefore, I am the space around me. I am the potential of being the miserable man again if I choose to, which would be just staying unconscious, twisting my shoulder back, letting my eyes wander, letting my whole body tense and my breath shallow, That could be me if I choose that. That is the nature of free will. As far as I'm concerned, it is our attention. That's all we actually have. Because otherwise, you think about what you're going to say, you mess it up. You think about playing the piano, you mess it up. It's not conscious the thought. It's like Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow. There's the thing that we're working with all the time that we think is this we're in the intelligence business. We're on the computer. We're consuming information. We're thinking and putting that out there. Well, it actually turns out that the elephant and the rider thinks they're the ones in control, but it's actually this big honking elephant. That's the thing that's choosing where you're going. The rider's just making up excuses why you turn left instead of right.
Right.
Well, you got to get in relationship with this big self, this thing that has all these conditioning that is just trickling down the generations to make me do this thing, this anger response. It's only when I wake up to the fact that I am my attention. Where do I place it? I place it on the breath. What do I do with it? I deepen and slow it. And I keep my attention there until the anger subsides. And that's the only way. It's the only way it works.
I'm so happy that you were able to spend some time with me and for us to figure out a time to meet, because what you just said, that last segment, was so powerful. Everything you said is going to be clips on that. I can guarantee you. And they'll
Excellent.
be on YouTube Shorts and on TikTok. It's interesting that the mind can go so deep and the mind can give you all these facades that think, oh, yeah, I know what I'm doing. And it actually is going down the wrong path. We do that constantly. And to have someone to say, hey, you're going the wrong way, is
Yeah.
so powerful. It's so powerful. We're not going to talk about single parents and the discrepancy in how the children learn and what they're missing, because they don't have two people saying, hey, don't go that way. And that one person is also trying to keep a roof over your head. So it's difficult for you to figure out which is the right way. So you look around, you look at your friends, your peers, your society, your environment. And then that's where you come to your conclusions. But just because you give yourself a conclusion doesn't necessarily mean that's what you really wanted.
Mm.
You told yourself that's what you wanted, but truly, is that what you want? And sometimes we give ourselves something that appears to be good, that looks good on paper. But when we finally put into action, we say, okay, there's some issues here. Similar to how many people who wish to win the lotto. Well, let's say you won the lotto. Okay, well, there's a lot of things that happen. Now you're in a different tax bracket all of a sudden. Now you have family coming out of the woodworks, friends looking for handouts. And they're going to say, well, if you want to remain friends, then you have to do this. The possibility of, someone coming to harm your family for ransom. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but we gave ourselves this dream. Oh, if I win, my whole life would change. Yeah, it would. And many of those lotto winners, if you ever spoke to them 5 years after the fact, they wish they never won. Why? This is exactly what they wanted. Money fixes all problems, right? Money's the power of all powers. But when they finally realize that was not the truth, and they're really looking at what truly matters, it's them. It's their sense of who they truly are. I have some clients who have billions of dollars, and they look for that fulfillment. It's not about the money. They look for how can they be gracious? How can they learn to be kind, loving, affectionate, because they have entwined themselves into their businesses and they have neglected their families for so many years. They're finally at the brink of maybe their partner is going to leave them or they're going to lose their business if they slip away. It's like a wake-up call to wake up. And that's what I love coaching. I love speaking with coaches. I love the process of coaching. And that's why I bring coaches like yourself, Daniel, on to the podcast, Coaching in Session, to give your perspective, to give your 2 cents, because the way you interpret things, the way you say things, you do things, the way you coach your practice is unique to you. And I encourage anyone who has listened to this episode, watched this episode, to reach out to Daniel and to say, hey, I have some anger problems. I have some depression problems, whatever it be. If you're maybe unfamiliar with the space that you're currently in, if you're a new parent and you're dealing with all those emotions that come with new parenthood, Daniel's going to have some wisdom on that. And I can attest, just from our brief conversation today, he's going to be someone who's going to help you through that. And you're always going to come out better. We do things that make us better every single day. And if I can from you, Daniel, please give us any last words, and then please tell the audience where they can find you.
I just want to say thank you This has been a beautiful conversation. I've very much enjoyed listening to your wisdom as well. The way you can reach me is danielhuntermoody.com, as well as at danielhuntermoody on Instagram. So for people that love music, but the simple question is do you want to write a song with me? If you have a story to tell, if you have some healing to do, if that idea excites you in at all, I want to take that spark and turn it into something beautiful. And if you are a dad who is struggling with resentment, with anger, I have been there. And whether it's me or anyone else, please talk to someone about it. Learn to embrace yourself fully because you deserve all the love that you're trying to give to your children.
Perfect. All of your information is going to be in the description box below, so people can easily find you, check out your social medias, your website, and then they can reach out to you. What you do is powerful, especially for men who are going to be first-time parents, maybe continuing parents. Life is changing every single day. I mean, just past the pandemic, life has flipped so many lives upside down, and many people are trying to find their truth, and they're trying to find their path, and they're trying to find their way again. And I know the work that you do is going to help people find their way and get them on the right track. I want to thank you so much, Daniel Moody, for coming on, sharing your wisdom, and sharing all the abundance that you have learned throughout your life.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. I would like to thank you for watching and or listening to this episode of Coaching in Session. Daniel has been a wonderful guest, wonderful man, throughout his life. And just because we have a moment in our life where it might not be good, it might not be pleasant, it might not be picturesque and perfect, we learn from it. In my life, I've learned from many of my mistakes, and I know I'm going to have many more mistakes. As I have grown, though, my mistakes have become less. Of course, I still have failures in business, and I have failures in relationships, especially with friends and family. Sometimes you grow up and you grow apart, but just because you grow apart does not mean you can't be cordial, does not mean you can't make things work. And when we look at our life, sometimes we have those areas where we think things are going okay, or we say, well, this is just how I am, this is who I am, but you can change. And I think that's one of the most important things people can realize. If you have a scarcity mindset, you don't have a scarcity mindset for the rest of your life. You can change it. If you have anger problems, you don't have anger problems for the rest of your life. You can change it. I think that's one of the most important things that we can realize. We can change. And in life, many changes are going to happen. Today, you're growing up. You're a day older than you were yesterday. In a year, you're going to be a year older. In a decade, you're going to be a decade older. Your body's going to be different. Your mind is going to be different. And it's not that you have turned out to be someone broken or someone that was incorrect 10 years ago. You have learned. You have become wise. One of my favorite quotes is talking about how we go in the realm of society. Tough times create strong men create easy times create weak men, and weak men create tough times, and it continues on in a circle. And I love what Daniel talked about in the episode where he said that you might have had really strict parents, and then you wanted to be a little bit more loose. You were too loose, and then now you have kids that were running rampant. And if we look at our society today, I know there's a lot of memes and a lot of people saying that I think the generation that got a butt whooping versus the Gen Z who had the timeouts is a little bit different, right? How they were raised and how they're moving. Not saying that they're moving wrong. It's just that they're giving themselves more challenges that could have been mitigated with a little bit of wisdom or a heavy hand maybe in the beginning. Because yes, you could have been loose and you could have been lax. And I've talked about this on the podcast. I think it was early in the first 100 episodes where I said one of the most dangerous phrases a parent can say is, I'm going to give my kid the life I never had. And you might have had a life where you got beat and hit, and every time you did something wrong, you got grounded, and you said, all right, I'm not going to do that to my kid. My kid is not going to get beat, and my kid is not going to get grounded. And then you have an unruly child, and you wonder where you went wrong. Well, there has to be some type of expectation. There has to be some type of discipline, similar to how you can be in a classroom that's very pragmatic. But in order to speak, you have to raise your hand. You just can't do what you want. There has to be some semblance of order. And I was aware, heavily aware, when I was a teacher, what am I doing? How am I teaching these kids? Because I didn't want just to teach them my way. I wanted them to learn their own way. And in the beginning, I was a music teacher. They said, oh, I'm not a good singer. I can't sing. Well, I told myself that too. All of high school, I didn't sing. And then come college, second year, I'm trying to sing because I'm trying to be a music teacher. And you have to be able to sing. Not well, but you have to be able to sing on pitch. And so I went down that process of encouraging myself, of learning music, and then being confident in my skills and my abilities. And then when I went into the schools and I taught music, there was no kid that says, oh, Mr. Rearden's a bad singer or you're not confident in singing. It was something that I had to learn, something I had to go through, where I wasn't confident, then I became confident. And then guess what happened? I saw it happening with the students. The first year I got there, oh, I'm not a good singer, I can't do this. Not a problem. Well, let's make you good singers. Let's get you confident. And we made learning and we made music a safe learning environment so they can sing and they can be open and there was no judgment. Even if someone made a mistake, they knew in my classroom, we do not ridicule, we support. Wherever you are in your journey of life, we are here to support you. And I know Daniel and myself, that is what we want. Wherever you are in your life, we want to support you. Whether you're looking for a life coach, you're looking for a mindset coach, if you're married with kids, married just in general, anger problems, insecurities, seek help. And it's not that you need the help. It's just that there's so much trial and error that you're going to go through that can be mitigated. And I always tell people, if you can get to a destination quicker, would you do that or would you take the path that's going to be more dangerous and more uncertain? And if I put it in that way, then people are like, all right, yeah, I want something that's a little bit quicker. Not saying that the scenic route is not good sometimes, but we give ourselves an opportunity to be open. We give ourselves an opportunity to learn about ourselves, about the world, and then about the people that we can become. And it's so interesting because sometimes the world, our parents, friends, they tell us how we should be rather than how we are. Though they might give us a blanket statement of how we are. Oh, you're disrespectful. Oh, you're angry. Oh, you're a narcissist. Yeah, sure. That's not going to do anything for change. It might. It's a possibility. But most likely the person is going to shove it off like, okay, I know I'm this type of person, but okay, well, I'm not going to change until there's a trauma that makes me change. But all in all, a great episode with Daniel and myself talking about life coaching, mindset, men, parenthood, and really getting a good understanding of the process of healing and changing your life. Because there's not one program that works for everyone. It's going to be customized to who you are and how you developed and your environment. Everything is going to play a factor. And it's important that you understand that if you're in a bad place, if you're in a rough spot, you can begin to make changes. Why not start today? Why not start now? Reach out to Daniel. You can head over to revenantconcepts.com and you can begin coaching. So important for you to understand the possibilities that lie within you and then the results that come after that. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Till then, everyone, take care.